Hello again, Booktube. I'm Mike, and this is Riff Raff's Reading Renaissance, and we've reached week 4 of GarbAugust. If we look at where we were last week on GarbAugust's bingo card, there's still a few squares to go. We still need a sequel that no one asked for, non-killer animals, group read, topical and modern trash, and the host recommendation. So let's see how we've progressed in the week gone by. The theme for week 4 is apocalyptic trash, and that's always a little bit of a challenge for me because I'm basically not someone who likes reading science fiction, and most of the apocalyptic stuff tends to be in the realm of science fiction. However, I have chosen some books that are apocalyptic in their own way. 2 books about non-killer animals who are destroying the world, but in very different ways. And finally, a book about a financial apocalypse. So let's get into it and see where we are. The first book I'd like to talk about is Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. Now I know you're immediately going to say, but this is trash week, this is GarbAugust, what are you doing? But I will quickly link the fact that the book I actually want to refer to this week as part of my trash is Ian McEwan's Bug A Cockroach. But the point of this is to start with Kafka's Metamorphosis. Kafka's Metamorphosis explores the absurdity of human existence around a character whose name is Samsa, who wakes up one morning to discover that he has become a bug. Ian McEwan's Cockroach takes the same concept and turns it on its head, where a bug wakes up one morning to discover not only has he become a human, but a politician. And his name, unlike Kafka's, who was called Samsa, his name is Sams. So it's an immediate parody take. The background to this book is Brexit in the UK. McEwan is a very strong Remainer. The 2 sides of the referendum were whether to remain in the EU or whether to leave the EU. And ultimately, the Leavers won in a surprise referendum. McEwan was very unhappy about this and has had no hesitation in declaring that it's a total disaster in his view. And as part of his protest, he wrote The Cockroach. So the narrative of The Cockroach is that this bug discovers, he wakes up as a human, discovers quite quickly that he is in fact the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Now I want to emphasize at this point that there's absolutely no parallel between this Prime Minister of Great Britain and a certain Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister at the time of Brexit. Just in the same way as the American president who appears in this book and tweets and imposes new laws and then reverses them and then doubles down again on them, has absolutely no relationship to the American president Donald Trump, who was in power at the time of Brexit. I just want to get those disclaimers out of the way up front so that we all fully understand what is in the parody and what's not. The concept of Brexit's referendum was about to leave or to remain in the European Union. In this book, that is satirized by the concept of the clockwisers who want to keep things running the way they should, and the reversalists who want everything to run backwards. Money would flow backwards, workers would pay for the right to work, consumers would be paid to go and shop in the shops, and the government funding would all flow to the government, not from the government. You start to get a feel for the absurd premise of the book. And the point here is not that it works, but that it is popular politically, and the populists amongst the political classes thereby adopt the ideology enthusiastically, despite the fact that there's no practicality to it at all. I'd like to read you a little bit. Ian McEwan is well known as a great writer, but I'd like to read you a section or 2 just to get a feel for the biting satire. If we start with the president, now remind you this is clearly not Donald Trump. This is what McEwan writes about the American president whose name is Tupper. In the polls, Sams is the UK Prime Minister. In the polls, Sams was up 15 points over Horace Crabb. In his early morning tweets, the American president described Prime Minister Sams as a great man and announced that it was time to reverse the entire US economy. Before lunch, 1,000 points were wiped off the Dow Jones. The next morning, Tupper changed his mind. He was, he said, just playing with the idea. Stock markets around the world were reassured. When the chairman of the Federal Reserve dismissed reversalism as loopy, the president doubled back in anger. Reversalism was on again. It would bring the old elite to its knees. The Dow Jones was untroubled. As one Wall Street insider said, the markets would panic when it was time to panic. The writing is uniformly biting, extremely funny, and a cynical satire of the ruthless politicians. If we look for another example, on a few pages back, what has happened is there's been an incident, I won't bore you with the details, but there's been an incident in which some UK fishermen have died, and boy are the politicians milking it for all they're worth. The coffins, draped in Union Jacks, were brought out in single file by members of the Grenadier Guards, marching in funereal slow step and placed at the Prime Minister's feet. The rain played well. He correctly refused an umbrella as he stood to attention in the downpour. Were those tears in his face? It was reasonable to think so. The nation came together in a passing frenzy of grief. I love that expression, passing frenzy of grief. Okay, there's another piece where the Prime Minister's special advisor has committed suicide after an unfair firing. It was Gloria, the young woman in the trouser suit who had come to wake Jim on that first morning, who tapped on the door late one evening to deliver the news. Simon had been found hanged by a tow rope in the bedroom of his house in Ilford, where he lived alone. Even better, there was no note. It's pretty hard-hitting. Then there's a section in the book where the Prime Minister leaks a false Me Too story to destroy an opponent. Let me read. On the opinion page, a younger member of the Guardian staff decreed that the victim was not only always right, but had a right to be believed. Reading his copy of the paper that afternoon, alone in the cabinet room, the Prime Minister found himself, on balance, siding with the latter. The more he read over his own work and admired the layout, the more convincing it became. He had to hand it to Jane. Such vicious, ruthless, heartless lying. Such an insult to real victims of masculine power. He wondered if he himself would ever have dared put his name to the article. Framed and confined within these pages, the story generated its own truth, rather in the way he imagined a nuclear reactor produced its own heat. Whether these things had happened or not, they might well have. They could so easily have. They were bound to have. They had. He was beginning to feel indignant on Jane's behalf. The Foreign Secretary was a wretch. Worse than that, he was late. The book goes on like that and is a very short but enjoyable read. And depending on your side of the Brexit argument, you will either thoroughly enjoy it or perhaps be a little bit disdainful of it. But I think the cleverness of basing a book on the premise of Kafka's classic Metamorphosis and then turning it literally on its head so that the cockroaches end up ruling the world is a very clever way of registering your political protest. Whereas Kafka's absurdities are universal and existential, McEwan's ones are both political and, of course, time-bound. In 100 years' time, people may not realize the relevance of this book. But anyway, that's my first book for the week. So in terms of the all-important bingo card, I reckon The Cockroach earns me 1 mark for the sequel no one asked for, another mark for the non-killer animals, a 3rd mark for topical trash because Brexit is recently in the news, and finally a 4th mark for modern trash because McEwan wrote the novel in 2019. So a very good return on a slim read. Next up, I want to cover the group read, or one of the group reads. This is Zoo, the book by James Patterson and Michael Ledwidge, basically Michael Who, the book by James Patterson, and some other guy who's best known for having written a book with James Patterson. The cover says, as if to warn us off, something very bad is happening out there. And I have to say, I don't think it's limited to out there. I think, having read the book, as a good trooper does on a group read, I think something very bad is happening in here as well. But James Patterson is James Patterson. 1 in 17 hardcover novels sold in the US are James Patterson books. 1 in 17. That's 6% of the books sold. That's 305 million books that he's sold. He's done co-authoring. This clearly is a business model that works for him. He's written novels co-authored with Bill Clinton. He's written novels co-authored with Dolly Parton. So he's got all the corners covered. I suspect it's a little like a certain US president who just hires out the right to put the name of his organization and his surname on top of buildings rather than actually having anything to do with those buildings. Then again, those of you who know Patterson, you either love or hate Patterson, but with Patterson, it's all about the 6 Ps. There's the precarious premise, the pretentious prose, and the product placement. If you don't believe me, I'll give you an example. Here comes the pretentious prose. As the attaboys accumulated, I took 5 from worrying about the end of the world to allow myself a golden moment of self-congratulation. And the product placement? I packed passport, clothes, gear. I had a 35mm Nikon with a super zoom lens, but my pride and joy was my professional grade Sony DSR 400L camcorder. I took it out of its padded bag and tested its lights, charged up its lithium batteries before I stuffed it all away again. Yes, indeed. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Patterson comes with the reputation, not entirely a good one, and he lived up to it. Okay, the book is about an apocalyptic theme, naturally, and it's about animals rising up against humans. Not just the normal scary animals, but pretty much all animals. Within the first couple of chapters, you tick off the big 5, slightly formulaically: the lion, the leopard, the elephant, the rhinoceros, the buffalo. They're all there doing damage to hapless humans. But then even the domestic animals get in on the caper. There's a frantic pace to the book, which is part of what says on the back here. The pages turn themselves. Well, somebody has to. And that means there's no time for character development. A testosterone-fueled plot races ever and ever faster towards the point of disaster. And to be honest, this is probably the fastest I've ever read a 395-page book. But the reason it was read so quickly, I will leave to your imagination. At the end, if I'm honest, you get all the nourishing goodness out of this book that you would from a fast food meal. But it serves some points on the bingo card. Definitely a point for group read, and of course, a point for killer animals. So thank you, James Patterson. My third book this week is a slightly different one. Again, the theme is apocalyptic trash. So I needed to find something outside of the sci-fi genre, because that's not my go-to genre, that would still qualify as apocalyptic. And I think I've found the right thing. This is a book about the travails of working in the finance markets and the banking industry in the city of London, which is the equivalent of, say, Wall Street in America. The book labors under the fantastic title, At Bonus Time, No One Can Hear You Scream. And it's written by David Charters. David Charters is a real industry insider. He's made a career working in merchant banking and investment banking. He's been a senior executive in Deutsche Bank. He's been around and he's seen it all. And now he's written a series of books, of which this is the first one. And this might just be the trashiest book I read in GarbAugust. The characters are shallow. They're uniformly despicable. The plot is predictable, and the prose is unimpressive. The only thing one might argue, as Steve always says, the best trash is when the author is in on the joke, and perhaps that's true here, as this is a highly successful financier writing a tongue-in-cheek book about how ridiculous some of the shenanigans are in the world of banking. The sad part of it is that all these characters and their situations are recognizable to anyone who's rubbed shoulders with this world, and I suppose the author should get credit for that. The protagonist, Dave Hart, is the despicable anti-hero who works in a high street bank in the city, and is in the setting of this first novel, is a few weeks out from the annual bonus, which is such a large financial event that it makes or breaks your whole financial year, where a single bonus is substantially bigger than the annual earnings. That's the crazy situation you have in these worlds. David has a wife, Wendy, who's his high spending, high maintenance, typical banking industry wife. Some people, of course, might find this book polarizing. You either love a wicked villain, or you find it distasteful to wallow in wealth while the world is undergoing downsizing and suffering unemployment. So there's two ways to look at it. Some like it and some don't. Obviously, some people have liked it enough that there's now 5 books in the series, laboring under titles like Trust Me, I'm a Banker, The Ego Has Landed, Where Egos Dare, all these rather painful puns. I have to say, this book reminded me of a cartoon series from the 90s, when the world was very much in the sort of post-Margaret Thatcher greed is good era. And that's the series of cartoons called Alex that appeared in the Daily Telegraph, etc., in London, in the banking world. The nudity on the front cover is not typical, so don't get the wrong idea about the book. Perhaps this is a more typical cartoon depiction, with the self-centered Alex in the phone booth and totally ignoring the suffering of the Londoners enjoying a typical London weather day outside in the queue. If I read you the back of this book, you'll get an exact feel for both the era that's depicted by this cartoon series that ran so successfully, and in fact by my choice of the book for GarbAugust. This says, for over a decade, the Alex cartoon has chronicled the rise, fall, and rise again of the wealth generation. Its heroes started life in the 80s as a brash yuppie with a mobile phone the size of a house brick, and over the years it has made the gradual transition to a successful 90s family man living in the country without surrendering anything of his appalling personality. Indeed, Alex has brought his snobbish, arrogant, and vindictive attitude to bear on the major events of the times, and his views have become required reading in the City of London, offering not only an insider's view into the business world, but also a scurrilous satire on professional middle-class lifestyles. The full Alex is the first comprehensive collection of these valuable social documents, culled from the business pages of The Independent and the Daily Telegraph. This is an absolute joy, and of course I'd like to dedicate this to Gareth at Book Songs and Magic, because I know how much he loves cartoons. I'm sure he knows of this series, if not this particular book. Turning now to the ever-important bingo card aspect of my trash book of the week. I guess it's 2 points. It's topical trash, obviously, and modern trash because of the period it was written in. I'm not necessarily recommending it to people. It is very funny, it's cleverly written, but it is about a subject that is worthy of satire, but not everybody's cup of tea. So, there we go. So I guess it's time to reflect a little bit as we hit the end of week 4 and the end of GarbAugust. It's been great fun sourcing the books, reading them, and reporting back to you on them. And if you've enjoyed the journey, please don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other stuff that we're supposed to ask you each week, and we always forget to do so. So thank you very much to my loyal subscribers. I appreciate you very much indeed. Reflecting back, my choices for the trash definition have been perhaps odd rather than rubbishy. There was the bear, there was Lolito, white trash, erotic vagrancy, the history of erotica, the lure of the limerick, the cockroach, and now the visceral world of the banking industry. But there's also been a few honourable, or should I say dishonourable mentions that I didn't get to. I didn't do the group read of Jilly Cooper's Rivals because the 700 pages would have obliterated the chance to read anything else. In my intro video, I alluded to this book called The World's Greatest Sex and Scandals. I delved into it, but frankly, it's so mundane and so overblown and oversold that I wasn't going to insult your intelligence with it. I mean, its scandal about Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor is about the fact that Burton never won an Oscar. I mean, it's hardly a pearl-clutching moment, is it? Then another book that popped up during my travels through the various charity shops that I frequent is one that looks like it was made for GarbAugust. It's McSweeney's Mammoth Treasury of Thrilling Tales. Now, I haven't started it, so I'm not going to talk to you about it. It's edited by Michael Chabon, which is probably a plus in its favor. And the authors who are cited on the front page include Stephen King, Michael Crichton, Elmore Leonard, Nick Hornby, Neil Gaiman, David Eggers, and more. So it's probably in there. So I'm well stocked for next GarbAugust. Let's put it that way. If we look at the bingo card, we've done well. In fact, there's really only one square missing, and that is the last square in the bottom right corner called Host Recommends. Now, I scoured the available areas where you can look up what the hosts are recommending, and I struggled, I'll be honest. Reading is a personal taste. I did, in fact, find one, the book Once Is Not Enough, by Jacqueline Susan, that was recommended by Regina at Regina's Haunted Library. Thank you, Regina. So I started this. I haven't finished it, so I'm not going to insult you with a half-baked take on it. It's pretty much what it says on the tin, and if you know about The Valley of the Dolls, I suspect you know about Jacqueline Susan's style of writing, and therefore this is a squarely in the middle of the target area of GarbAugust. I'd like to think I'm going to finish the book, but I wouldn't want to take an oath on it. The other thing reflecting on GarbAugust is that I have noticed that my GarbAugust videos have received fewer views than my non-GarbAugust videos. Now, I don't know what that's telling me about my loyal subscriber base, and I wonder if you'd like to let me know. If you have any strong feelings about GarbAugust versus the rest, or if you want to let me know what you enjoy more or less about what I'm doing, please let me know in the comments. I really would value that. I'm not promising to tailor to what you say, because as I say, reading is a very individual pursuit, and I think one must avoid the temptation to, chase the algorithm. I don't really, that's not the reason I started this channel. I started this channel because I wanted to talk to like-minded people about books that I love, not books that will help my statistics get better. I don't pretend that I don't watch the statistics, but they're not going to drive the process. That isn't the purpose of this channel. But I would be very grateful for your thoughts and comments just to help shape my thinking when I'm thinking about what kind of things to offer you next. And then the very last thing, and I hope this doesn't sound in any way elitist, that having spent the month reading largely trashy books, I do have that slight feeling you get when you've had too many convenience meals, too many trips to the fast food outlets, and where you're just sort of hankering for some really good meals or food or nutrition. And to be honest, I am feeling a little bit like that. Although some of the books I have read this month under GarbAugust have been genuinely good books. But next up is September, and that's encouraging because there's a slightly higher brow feel to the themes. If I think about Shake-Timber, which honors Shakespeare in all its aspects, and you've seen some of the hosts posting about that, and Framed in September, which is all about art appreciation. I'm very excited about that because a lot of my life, apart from the hours in which I earn my living, is spent pursuing one or other form of artistic expression, and that theme would offer me a little bit of interesting food for thought as to what I could do. And then there's also Shorty September, which I'm really quite excited about because probably I'm better known on this channel so far for reading enormous chunkers that one needs to tackle to be reasonably well read. But there are also a raft of short books sitting in my pile, some of which you can see in the corner of the shot, where I thought I would use the period of Shorty September to really focus and see if I can't eliminate just a few of them from the TBR. And yeah, so if that sounds like a little bit of interesting stuff to engage with me on as I travel further on my journey of Riff Raff's reading renaissance, please stay tuned. I really appreciate it. And now I'll bid you bye-bye till next time. Thank you, Booktube.